Hi everyone. For those of you who do not know me, my name's Nat and I'm the head of community at an organization called Exceptional Individuals. We support neurodiverse individuals find high-end employment because it's tough out there, but we have an abundance of skills to share and to give, and that's what we're on about today. We are doing a series of webinars each week, which hopes to get you nearer and ideally into employment, from being able to feel more confident, to understand how to find an inclusive employer, to know what assistive technology is out there, and then some. Let's use this as a good starting point. Now, what are we even here doing today? Well, being ND is tough as it is, let alone finding jobs which have typically been created and designed for neurotypical people. If we want to find a job which actually gets us rather than discriminates us, we need to know what inclusivity looks like. Easier said than done. And if you've come today thinking you're going to walk away with a beautiful answer that's succinct and crystal clear, think again. But what I am able to do is give you a few top tips on how to take an educated guess in picking an employer which is more likely than not to have your back and at least have a basic understanding. We're going to do absolutely in our power to help. I'm neurodiverse and I honestly get it. Finding work was a tricky one. Today, we are predominantly going to be looking at dyslexia, dyspraxia, autism, ADHD. But honestly, a lot of these tips are going to be universal for any sort of minor marginalized group. Maybe you've got your dyscalculia, maybe you've got physical disability, mental health. Honestly, a lot of these tips will be very transferable, but we are going to have a hyper focus today. Here's our lovely team. I finally updated the slides. We've got rid of the people who abandoned us, but we've got all the new people. Today, we've got myself in the chat, we've got Lizzie in the chat, and we've also got April in the chat. Feel free to message in common, and we are here to support. Inclusive employment. Do we even know what it works? Does it even exist? I often say to people, no, it doesn't. But inclusive managers do exist. Inclusive people do. And if you get enough of them, then maybe you could get an inclusive organization. Today is going to be a mix of optimism, but also realism. I'm here to give you the honest thing. All right, what are we talking about? We're talking about inclusivity. What does it even mean? We're talking about how to find these damn inclusive employers. They're like, where's Wally at the moment? But I tell you, they are out there. We're going to be looking at what a disability competent employer is. It's this government scheme. There's pros to it. There's cons to it. You know, the theory of it is amazing. The reality, not much, but it doesn't mean it's completely worthless. We've also worked with a range of employers that we have personally trained. That doesn't mean they're amazing, but it does mean that we can say to at the very, very minimal, they have had some basic training on understanding neurodivergence. We're going to be looking at the Quality Act 2010. Now, if any of you are not living in the UK at the moment, let me know in the chat. But I'll give a little overview just because I'm from the UK and I know the policies and the legal stuff a lot better than other countries. And we're also going to be talking a bit about funding as well. Now, some of you may be familiar with these things, but you may not be familiar with it from a ND perspective. So first question, how would you describe autism to an employer? Now, you may not have autism. You could do it to any ND that you have, but I want to know, would you even describe it to them? And if you were to describe it to them, would you just say, meh, autism? Would you say, oh, I have Asperger's? Would you say, I think differently? Would you say, I struggle with certain jokes? Like, what would you say? We got black and white thinking. While I see where you're coming from with that, I think sometimes that could be conceived as less creative. Smart people. Yeah. But we can also do some silly things sometimes. It's a spectrum. Absolutely. I think a spectrum's good. But another thing, all of these words, while they are useful and ways of describing autism, they describe it in such a narrow way that it doesn't show the full 3 dimensions of who you are as a person. Quirky. Yeah, it's like a nice way of saying weird, but I like to say I'm quirky as well. Spiky profile of skills. Yep. But I would pull you up on that. What does it mean to have a spiky profile? Needs complete clarity. Nice. When I want a description, we need to always assume that the people we are talking to know absolutely nothing If we do that, then we're able to set the stage and explain it in a way that we want them to understand it. Because when we think of autism, the average Joe, they'll think of Rayman, they'll think of people kind of rocking in the corner, people who are over, they'll think like the most severe of the severe. And for most of us, I would imagine you probably are quite capable of independent living, or at least trying to be. You're most likely masking, which means people would necessarily know you have autism unless they got to know you on a deeper level. How do you kind of set the stage to show your autism as a strength, which can benefit an organization, but also show that there are elements that you would need additional support in, perhaps? Okay, nice. We've got some more detailed questions coming in now. People have a lot of strengths, but do not always adapt to conformity. Oh, that's a nice way of wording it. Need clear explanations, not between the line speech. Oh, yeah. Difficulties with maintaining eye contact and expressing facial expressions. I'm great at some skills, I struggle with some. I am not the average person. Nice. Give some scenarios and examples. Yes, I like that. Meticulous and thorough, need more time, but with exceptional results. Nice, I like it. The more we're going on, the more I'm seeing a balanced approach. We are not about condemning autism to the pity realm today. We're also not here to put it on a pedestal and say we're all superheroes. We're here to say it's a spectrum, there's good, there's challenges, but they're just different to the strengths and challenges that a neurotypical person. Start off to find an inclusive employer. We need to position autism to them to begin with. Because while you might have a lot of managers who genuinely are kind and caring, their understanding of such conditions might be narrow. They might have like a cousin they visit every couple of years who has autism, and they are basing the entire spectrum on that one individual. This is why the more you know and the more that you're able to communicate it, the better. All right, great questions. There we are. Next question is, what does an inclusive employer look like? Who are they? Where are they? What would you expect? If an employer said they were inclusive, what would you expect to be ticked off? Now you can go from your previous experience, what you wish was true. Because this is another thing that we're going to struggle with, is that organizations may say they're inclusive, but what is their definition of inclusion? And does it align with what your definition of inclusion is? We've got accommodations are made based on individual needs. Yep, I like that. Individual is key here. If they say accommodations based on diagnosis or conditions, that's not going to work because we're different. No idea. That's why I'm here. Solid answer. You're in the right place. They accept employees from various backgrounds, including neurodivergent ones. Yes, being inclusive isn't unique to neurodivergence. It's all blah, blah, blah. I'm guessing what you're saying by there is, it's just a word. It doesn't mean much. Now, I would say it can mean something, but you have to kind of sift through the corporate blah, blah to the real life caring, which does exist. Able to listen and adapt individual employees, DEI and LGBTQA+ groups in the business. Essentially, proof is in the pudding. What are they currently doing which shows they are being inclusive rather than just saying it? I like that. Acknowledgement of various social and sensory needs. Not everyone needs the same and enjoys the same. Yep, I like the ones we're moving on to a lot more kind of what are we actually seeing? Ask how you need support rather than assume. Yep. I'm seeing there's a lot of actions. Perhaps not have to ask if they are to see inclusion policies and processes and actions. Yeah, ideally, they should speak for themselves. It should be apparent from the application to the website, to your first interaction, to interactions later down the line. But we obviously need to know beforehand because you don't want to go through all the rigmarole of getting the job only to find out it's not a great fit. It's all talk. I don't believe in that. So we've got a really mixed broad of opinions. Inclusive, a buzzword for most employers. Not gonna lie to you, you're right. For most employers, not all employers, but also if there is enough demand for something, if there is enough talent which requires an organization to have something, they will adapt. And this is why we are seeing neurodivergent individuals becoming more and more appealing to organizations, because there is a massive talent gap in a lot of organizations. there is a massive gap in diversity of thought and innovation. So now that that is that gap, suddenly we're flavor of the month. Now, who's to say where we'll be in the next couple of months? But I do see this as a general trend. So I would say now is the time to act and really capitalize on your difference and to sell it as a strength. Appreciate the different ways of thinking within the team. Most employees say they do, but I've been managed out of several times because of my difference, even when I'm clearly overperforming. That's another great point, actually. How do you sift through the job advert, which says we want innovative thinkers, to the reality of, okay, if you want all this lovely innovative thinking that I have in my brain, are you able to support me with the additional challenges or the struggles that I may have? Because you don't get all of these beautiful talents for free. Everything comes at a cost. And this is why you've got to make sure both sides of the coin are tailored for. So let's actually go. Let's find some. Let's go on a treasure hunt. Let's find some of these diamonds in the roughs, these beautiful gem of an employers. Where would we even start to look? Now, all of these things I'm going to show you, they are not perfect. I am not saying they are, but they are a small piece in the puzzle. So for instance, let's look at some inclusion lists. At the moment, one of the most recent ones is the 2022/23 Inclusive Top 50 UK Employers list. And this is just one scheme. There's many schemes if you look around the internet. But these are like kind of badges of approval which say these people are A-OK on the whole. And we've got, click the ones that you most like the look of. Would you want to work for West Midlands Fire Service, which apparently is one of the most inclusive organisations? Maybe Capgemini? Maybe you want to work for Touchstone, West Midlands Police? No one? No one wants to be a Bobby on the beat? Or are none of them the right job for you? Now, to be honest, I'm quite surprised that a lot of you picked the others. Because truthfully, this list, let's say, while they are inclusive employers, it's not inclusive in terms of location. It looks like you got to go to the West Midlands if you want to have a good life. Yay, Midlands. But if you want to go anywhere else, they don't take the top list. What are you meant to do? If you want an inclusive employer, do you have to go and travel to find one? Well, ideally not. But I will say, if you go on these lists and you see organizations which are local to you, then you should do a little bit of research. Like, okay, Capgemini, why are you on this top list? What did you do to it? Did you make any pledges? And it's a great starting point to a conversation. These lists, not perfect, but not a bad starting point. We've always got to make sure of the credibility, because I'm not saying about this one, but there are others where people basically pay to get on them. So take it with a grain of salt. But I do think this one is quite a good one. But again, these are more the ones which tend to rank quite higher. Interestingly, tend to be much smaller organizations, which, you tell me, why is that? Why are smaller organizations have a higher likelihood of ranking higher? Oh, we've got a beast of an email. Okay, April. Okay, April says, I received email updates for Quora Digest. They email me all the time as well. In one of them, an autistic person got fired from their job because their boss thought they were lying when they weren't really. The autistic person was off sick for 2 days. When they returned and their boss asked them where they were really happened, the autistic person said the same as they text, but their boss thought they were lying because they didn't maintain eye contact when they explained their answer. And that is a classic examples where there isn't anything wrong with being autistic. There is nothing wrong with being neurotypical, but it is a mismatch between the communication styles. One says one thing, the other says another thing. And we communicate with our eyes, our ears, like all our senses. But those with autism might put more emphasis in some places than others. So challenges. But yeah, good shout, April. Depressing, but it's definitely good to know these examples. Now let's take a bit more of a interesting. Now, and this one is vague, but let's work with it. Which media companies are linked to dyslexia? Now, we are going to not look at any awards, not look at any accolades. We are going to look at the very root of an organization's key values and foundations. We got Walt Disney from Disney. We got Richard Branson from Virgin Media. We've got Steven Spielberg from DreamWorks. And we've got Steve Jobs from Pixar. Yeah, he did Pixar as well. Well, some of them bought them, but still, they were involved at the beginning at least. So actually, all of these marvelous people are dyslexic. Now you might think, okay, what does this have to do with finding an inclusive employer? Well, it might not tell you much about how they are as an organization today in terms of the initiatives they're doing. But what it does tell you is they were founded on the belief that being different is an advantage. Most of these individuals, if you kind of look at their backstories, it's the classic rags to riches. It's about being an underdog, being a misbehavior, being misunderstood and judged, and deciding to break away from the norm and set up their own enterprise and build it into a flourishing company. Now, if I was to apply for a job, I would 100% disclose my dyslexia if I was to work in these organizations, and I would mention the history. It shows your understanding. It shows a connection between someone, ideally they probably admire. So for instance, when you're looking at organizations, find a bit about the background, learn about the history, see if there's kind of an element you connect with. I can't vouch for the Disney Corporation as today, but I do know if you were to get a job interview, maybe you could use that to your strength or advantage. With any of these ones though, please do let me know if you agree with me or if you think, nah, that ain't going to work at all. But I would say when you're trying to piece the bits of the puzzle together in terms of what makes us an inclusive employer, any little breadcrumb will help you make the right decision. All right, next thing you might want to look for if you're trying to find a company which gets your values and will support you is finding an ERG. Now, what the hell is an ERG? Now, Lizzie in the chat, you were asking me yesterday what's an ERG. Fingers crossed you get this right today because we learned it yesterday. But it is a great sign that if an organization has an ERG in neurodiversity, that they have a community which understands and is fighting for the rights of people like us. Yay, you remember. All right. And woohoo, it is an employee research group. I know the name is boring, but it's actually a really cool thing. Think of it like a social group, a community, a society, like you would have had like back in the uni days. It is a group run by a demographic of employees for that demographic. You might see like LGBT plus Q ERGs, you might like women ERGs. Now you might see disability ERGs. And this is where we get a little bit interesting. So are there many organizations that have neurodiversity ERGs? No, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're a bad employer. It might mean due to the size. If you've got a massively large organization, the likelihood of having an ERG is a lot higher. If you've got a tiny organization, there's probably not enough staff to make up an ERG. So this is why I'd say looking about their employee research group can be a really good direction to look into if you are looking at one of those really big employers. If for smaller employers, it might not be a fair thing to kind of quiz them against. Another thing that is worth knowing is that we are working with a lot of organizations which will, for example, have a disability network, but they will not have an ND network yet. That, again, people are early in their journeys, but you could speak to them, say, I'm really passionate about neurodiversity. I'd be wanting to help set up this group. Do you have people currently working towards it? What kind of activities do your ERGs have? How active are they? These are the type of questions you can really push. In ERG, sometimes they can be a small group of disgruntled employees who want change. Other times they can be a really powerhouse of an organization where they get funded to help on activities and kind of help promote and spread awareness. Definitely do your research. But again, not a bad starting point, but this mainly is only relevant for the really big organizations. So these are some organizations which have ERG. Now click the ones which you are most familiar with or you'd be like most interested in. As you can see, these are the big organizations. There are pros and cons to the size of the organization when it comes to inclusivity. Smaller organization tends to be more flexible and willing to kind of mold the role around you, but they have less funding to support you financially, where the flip side is with bigger organizations. Oh, Anna says, based on that, would you say it's better to look for larger organizations than smaller businesses? Well, yeah, not necessarily. So while these big organizations, in theory, might have a neurodiversity network already established, creating change and getting your voice heard and having adjustments which have not been made before can be a real struggle. They're a lot more rigid. Where smaller organizations, they are much more likely to make free, easy adjustments. But it depends really. Do you fight and then get something which is costly but worthwhile? Or do you take a more kind of easier route where you might not get everything you need, but they'll do everything in their power in order to get you that help? So yeah, it depends. Annoyingly, I'm going to be saying that quite a lot today. But yeah, Microsoft, they have a really big ERG. SAP, they also have a big one. Now, some of these aren't ND specific. Some of them are more like disability or well-being groups. Worthwhile. JP Morgan has an ND group. Ford has an Autism to Work program. Now, this isn't technically an ERG. This is where they actively work to get autistic people into the workforce. It's a program. Ernst & Young has an ND and ability network. Yeah, they great networks, to be fair. And I'm not saying you should, if you're interested in, say, working in the financial services or consultancy, then you would want to look at these organizations. If you're not interested in that sector, I guess it doesn't really matter if they've got a really big ERG. But if you've never heard of them, I like the idea of an ERG because it shows that this isn't just a corporate line. These are people within the organization who truly get it and are very passionate. The next thing I want to look at with you is disability confident employers. Have any of you ever heard of it? Now, this is a UK scheme. If you're not in the UK, let me know if you know of any similar ones. But thumbs up if you've heard of it. Thumbs down if you've not heard of it. Now, this scheme used to be known as like the 2-tick system. Some of you may remember it as that. And what it is, it's like a badge of approval. If an organization has got like tick, 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 then they are disability confident. If they do even more, they get a new award like Disability Confident Employer. And if they do even better, they're Disability Confident Leader. Now, we're a disability confident leader at Exceptional Individuals. And I've met a lot of people in the government who have worked on this scheme to help create it. In theory, it's a really great scheme. But again, I want to be honest with you. While I would recommend this as a starting point, you can literally go on the website for Disability Confident and you can search every employer which has signed up to it. You can sort by region. You can sort about what level they're on, like, bronze, silver, gold. And then you can reach out to them saying, hey, I saw that you are a disability confident employer, and see what kind of thing they have agreed towards. Some will agree guaranteed interviews if you have a disability, agree to inclusive training, workplace needs assessment, but you do have to look. Oh, I would only look at the leader tier. Yeah, Anna, and I kind of would as well. Why? Because to be totally honest with you, to get disability confident status, and you'll sometimes see it on like the email signature of companies or on the bottom of their websites, super easy, barely an inconvenience. Honestly, you could do it in a couple of seconds. So, it's a token of goodwill, doesn't mean much than that. But to get employer or the leader status, you do actually have to sign some things. You have to send some details, some proof and evidence. It's much more robust and they do review. But that being said, it isn't mandated. For instance, if you don't follow the rules, doesn't matter. Again, it's a nice idea, but I wouldn't, put all my eggs in one basket on the scheme. Another classic example where disability confident, I think, is better for small organizations. Why? Because small organizations, everyone tends to be in the loop, right? If a small organization says they are disability confident, they would have, as a team, discussed it, worked on it, created policies, and kind of created a nice structure. Nice and easy. But if a really, really big multi-global organization has signed up to be disability confident, do you honestly think that every single person in the organization knows what they have signed up to? Do you think they actually know what it means to be disability confident? No, it'll be someone in like HR who did it on their in between their lunch break and their next meeting and signed up. the good gestures which they are signing up to do not always filter through. That's another thing I would want to follow up on. I see you are disability competent. What have you done in order to train the wider organization around these set of principles? As you can see, when you're looking at organizations and which ones are inclusive, a lot of it does come down to size. Big organizations have some pros, smaller organizations have other pros. But it's definitely a worthwhile list to look at. You can download it as like an Excel document, and it's quite extensive. And what you can do is hold the organizations to account. It's not legally blinding or anything, but it's still interesting to say, hey, I noticed that you have agreed to X, Y, and Z. Would you be willing to give me an adjustment in this interview? And if they said no, it would look really bad on them. Good starting point. All right, now let's look at the wheel of disability leaders. The leaders is the kind of like highest one you can. And there's a few organizations. I've mainly kind of did TV companies today because that's my background. And I thought, let's stick with one industry. But for instance, I want to work in the TV industry. I could apply to thousands of different companies. But the Tate Gallery is not a TV company. Oh, well. But, the Tate Gallery, they are disability confident leaders. Actually, maybe I might apply to them. So for instance, I'd look at my industries and think, well, I don't know. Let's say Channel 5 has a job opening and ITV has a job opening, but one of them is registered as a disability confident leader. I'd be more inclined to apply to the leader one because the likelihood of them being inclusive is higher than the organization who hasn't signed up. Hopefully that makes sense. Oh, Helen says, I think diversity became both word even before you apply through double tick. It is really hard to be included. Yeah, that's interesting that you mentioned the 2-tick one. Now, another starting point, I'm giving you many here today, is us. Now, we are an organization which actually works with organizations which want to be inclusive, and these are just some of the organizations we work with. We work with Aviva, Universal Music, Man Group, which is our investment, Liberty Global, Kantar, just to name a few. Can I, hand on heart, say all these organizations are inclusive? Well, no, I can't because everyone's on a journey. But what I can say is every organization we've worked with, we have trained their wider team on neurodiversity. We have trained their managers on better to support them. We've worked on policy and procedures. We've chatted to their managers. We've helped their current staff with internal assessments. We've helped with recruiting. All these organizations have actively made steps in order to support ND people. And I can vouch for them in terms of what I've mentioned. For instance, say you want a job at Aviva. Well, you could go via exceptional individuals and we might be able to help implement reasonable adjustments or make sure that as soon as you start the job, if successful, you get that assessment because Aviva have signed an agreement with us in order to support ND people. The pros of this is that 1, you already know us. 2, we have done quite substantial training with a lot of our partners. The cons of it, and I'll be honest with you, we only have so many partners. We don't have an extensive list. Some of the organizations that you're interested in just may not be on there. But if you are interested in any of the ones on our list, definitely you could go far worse. All right, moving nicely on. I know it's a lot of information, but I want to give you all the tools imaginable in order to make the best decision. The next is the good old Equality Act 2010. We used to have loads of different Equality Acts, but then we merged them together. And this is to protect people like you and me. Now, this is kind of what I call like the nuclear bomb. I wouldn't start quoting the Equality Act until I had to, because you might rub people up the wrong way. But it does help you know what you're entitled to and what your rights are. Now, I want to know, have any of you ever faced any discrimination against any of these protected characteristics? If you have, put a little pin on them, or put a pin on the one which you feel most discriminated against. I say that because you can only pick one. Okay, we've got disability, gender. Okay, nice. Race. Well, first of all, I'm sorry that you have felt that you have been discriminated against. It sucks. But it's good to know that under the Equality Act, All of these areas, age, disability, gender reassignment, race, religion or belief, sex and gender, sexual orientation, pregnancy, maternity, and marriages, partnerships, it is against the law to discriminate. So if you feel that you have been discriminated, if you wanted, you could go to a legal route with that. Now, another thing that's really important to mention is you may look on this list, there isn't one for neurodiversity. And this is because officially being neurodivergent counts as a disability. Now, here is where we get a little bit of a grey area, because we exceptional individuals say being neurodivergent is disabling by society and not inherently a disability. And there's a lot of people who are neurodivergent who do not consider themselves disabled. But under the UK law system and a lot of other countries, it is just grouped in with disability. So for the sake of the Equality Act and our organisations, it can be better to say, yes, I resonate with having a disability. Because if you say I'm not disabled, then they could potentially use that against you. In these situations, I think be proud the fact that it is included and that it is covered. And I guess the argument is, if you are facing discrimination, it's because you're different. So this isn't something that I would necessarily use when applying for a job, but what it would do is give me confidence to know that should worst case happen and I feel unfairly treated, I don't just have to grin and take it. I'm actually able to take it further should I wish. That being said, would I recommend taking it further? It's a long, lengthy, tiring process. Only do it if you honestly feel that this is something that you strongly believe you would win and also morally believe in it. Because I wouldn't want to put any of you through the stress unnecessarily, but also let's not get discriminated against. I don't just be a mat. Angela says, does this impact future employment? No. Because if it did impact future employment, that would once again be discrimination. We could do them again. But no, it doesn't. And it's not on any records. Like individuals will know, but no. I think you are safe to do it without any repercussions. Officially. Bear in mind, everything I say, this is like the official line. As we know, the world doesn't work all hunky-dory. There's always kind of potential risks. That is a decision up to you. Well, Emma says, I'm taking on my house and society under the Equality Act. Oh God, then you'll know how it's not a walk in the park. It's not like, they said that to me, pay up. It takes forever. But good on you for doing it. I think employers have to know their legal obligations. Ideally, they go further than legal obligations, but there are quite a few instances where they actually fall below it. So holding them to account is important. The next step to finding an inclusive employer is making sure that should you be successful, they have support systems and strategies in. What a lot of organizations tend to do is they wait until you're struggling, when the wheels fall off the wagon, when you're burnt to the ground and everyone's miserable, and then they may help you. Too late by that point. You want to make sure there's help from day one and other people in the organization has received support. You don't feel like you are just being singled out, and it is a natural, organic, embedded part of their culture and onboarding. What does this in-work support look like? Well, first of all, let's look at what support you have had previously. So tell me, in education, what accommodations, if any, did you have? And this is relevant because if you just go up to an employer saying, okay, what recommendations can you give me for dyslexia? Do you think they honestly know? They don't know. A lot of them have never had any training. They'll just say, have some yellow paper and be done with it. But if you say, when I was at college or university, I had 25% extra time, I had access to a computer, I had noise cancelling headphones, then essentially they'll just copy and paste. They'll kind of duplicate that support. It's really good to have an idea of what would benefit you before asking for support. I know in an ideal world, it wouldn't be like that, but we've got to work with reality. Those people have no idea. Kiara says, extended time on official tests. Same here. Or we got one-to-one support in class at school, college and uni for autism. I wasn't diagnosed to 27/40, nothing in education. Oh, for the 2 different diagnoses. None as a female, I was only diagnosed at 39. Late diagnosis, extra time, extended time, reasonable adjustments, assistive technologies, late diagnosis. It's a mixture. A lot of you have not had support. And as such, you may not be able to offer recommendations. If you have had things, mention them because you're building up a case. When I currently do my master's, and in order to get additional support, I essentially had to prove that support I had before to kind of justify continuing that support. It was actually a lot more challenging. But what do you do if you haven't had any support before? Well, there are a few things, and I'll go on to them in a moment about workplace needs assessment, but a few top tips for managers. First of all, rethinking recruitment. The way that we recruit at the moment is essentially getting as many people to apply as possible and then setting up kind of walls and obstacle courses and see kind of which person makes it to the end. Unfortunately, a lot of those walls and obstacles unfairly target those who are neurodivergent and make it to the end. So how can we recreate it that we are getting the best talent with the most diverse mindset? Educating staff. And I appreciate a lot of you are job seekers, but knowing what managers should be looking for, I think can also be quite helpful. We've got, but last year, my actual quite good at university employer preference to me to extend sick leave. Then, okay, I'll come back to that. Yeah, managers should be educating staff as well. I would always ask, do you have an awareness of neurodiversity? What training have your team had around it? One thing which I think a lot of people forget in interviews is this isn't just about them grilling you. It's also your chance to grill them and to make sure that they're the right company for you. It is a two-sided thing. It doesn't have to be like all the power to them. Open conversations, have people be disclosing, do people feel comfortable? Have people be teaching empathy skills, soft skills? For instance, an organization may not have received any ND training, but have they received people training, which can be transferable? And reasonable adjustments. That is what we're going to look into a bit more now. So workplace adjustments for neurodiverse people. At this point, I want you to give me every example you can think of or potential adjustments which either you have had or have heard of that would benefit someone. Because once again, managers will heard of reasonable adjustments, but unless you tell them what potentially could work for you, they're just going to kind of give you the bare basics. You have to work midway. I always call it like a 50-50 approach, where you as an individual, you understand your neurodivergence to the point where you can explain it confidently, and the manager has had at least a basic level of training around it and has a few ideas already to go to kind of trial and error. Okay, we've got the no distraction rule. We've had time, remote working from home office. Has anyone had like other any assistive technology, like speech software, text to speech, speech to text, noise cancelling headphones, like Grammarly, spell checkers, anything like that? Or what have you got your own office? Living the dream. Flexible home working. Oh, nice. Planning, morning off, time. Oh yes, April had assistive technology at uni as well. All these adjustments you can ask for. And this is another area where a lot of people fall short, is that they'll say, I have dyslexia. And the manager will say, okay, we will give you this. Now, that is just what they're used to giving. The next thing, you might go and have an official assessment and they might offer some equipment. But what a lot of people don't realize is you can actually ask for equipment. The people who do your assessment do not know anything, or do not know everything. So if you know something which they have not heard of, as long as you can justify why it would be beneficial, then there's a good chance that they could apply for it. So what's the reasonable adjustments? First of all, a quiet place. If you struggle in loud environments, asking for a quiet place is perfectly reasonable. Having a workplace needs assessment, they're free through the UK government, and a lot of organizations do them internally. Specialist training. Yes, you might be having training on Excel, but maybe they could give you additional training on time management or understanding social cues or kind of whatever your unique challenges are. Having a more flexible approach, and this doesn't just mean working from home. For some of us, we genuinely struggle with sleeping because of like ADHD, kind of shutting down, the mind going all over the shop. Maybe you could have later hours and earlier mornings or vice versa. Anything is reasonable as long as you can justify it and it doesn't negatively impact the organization. Clear communication, structured routines, appropriate software. There are so many different things you can do. I recommend, if possible, to try some of these like gadgets and gizmos out before you ask for them, because some of them are like a godsend, others just do not work. And that is a very individual process. So let's have a quick look. If any of you were interested in having an official workplace needs assessment, first of all, your employer has to agree because that is a reasonable adjustment in order to have an assessment. Second of all, if you are neurodivergent, you are eligible. Remember, it counts as a disability. And in the UK, we have a scheme called Access to Work. I mention it all the time. Honestly, you should apply for it. Even if you feel that you don't need help right away, having it in place can help you later down the line. Here are just some of the things that you could apply for. Obviously, you can also apply for softer things like coaching and mentoring, but there's kind of harder skills like kind of a monitor that has a fast refresh rate to stop headaches, pens which you could scan things and they read them back to you, notepads that you write on and it automatically converts it into digital text, noise cancelling headphones. There is a wide variety of things which can help, but you have to try them out. They're not all created equally. They're very expensive. This is why I would definitely recommend applying for a scheme which can either get them for free or substantially discounted for the organization. As an individual, you never have to pay. Now, the eligibility, I won't spend too long on this, but just some of you know whether or not this is worth getting your hopes up on, or if not. First of all, you have to have a disability or a neurodivergence. Now, if any of you resonate with having dyslexia, dyspraxia, autism, ADHD, a different neurodiversity or a disability, you are eligible. And best of all, you do not have to be diagnosed. As long as you resonate, you're eligible. But if you do not resonate and you do not have a neurodiversity, not eligible. Oh, thanks, April. So the eligibility, there's a few more little nuances, but to give you a basic overview, first of all, slide left if you're under 16. Let's be honest, all of you are over. Are you employed? You have to be over 16 to get the grant. You have to be employed. That's a big one. If you're volunteering, if you're working for free at the moment, if you're looking for employment, unfortunately, you're not eligible. Sucks, I know, but those are the rules. If you have been with an employer for over 6 weeks, the employer may have to pay. Just worth knowing. That's not your problem. That's their problem. But if you have only joined within the first 6 weeks, it's free. And this is why the sooner you apply, the better it is for everyone. If your contract is less than 3 months, you would be eligible. You have to have a 3-month plus contract and then you're eligible. And if your organization has less than 50 employees, it's always free, regardless of the time period. If you have more than 50 employees, then the organization may have to pay if you're over 6 weeks. So these are just like some of the little nuances. Yeah, please do look into that. Oh, and it says why there isn't a scheme for people who are unemployed and are prepping to look for work. You're on your own at the very start of the process. No, I agree, Anna. I think it's messed up. I wish I had a better answer for you. But luckily, you could come to, like, as an organization, we aim to help people at the early stages and then get a job, then get the assessment in place. Also, in terms of where you live in the UK, this scheme is open to those in England and Wales. If you're in Scotland, I think maybe slightly different. And if you're in Northern Ireland, a fair bit different. Yeah, and if you're anywhere else in the world, the scheme probably doesn't exist, but there may be equivalents or alternatives. But also you can ask your organization to do a private one, depending on like how generous they're feeling. This map is tiny. I'm just going to assume everyone's in England. So if you're self-employed, first of all, you can apply for this grant. Do not think that you are not eligible. And a lot of ND people are self-employed. So if you have been self-employed for 1 year plus, you're eligible. And if you have earned over £6,200 last year, you're also eligible. But if you haven't done those, as long as you have a very detailed business plan that outlines your projected forecast, you may still be eligible. Do not think that being self-employed means that you aren't eligible for support. And as you're just one individual, it would all be free as well. So I definitely recommend signing up to this should you be self-employed. How to apply, blah-de-blah. So yeah, great that you told me about it, how to apply. Well, you can go directly via the government website, but I would recommend going via our website just because then you get trained by us. And also we only support neurodiverse people, where the government website supports everyone. But all you need to do is go to exceptionalindividuals.com, you click on neurodivergent jobs, you go for a workplace needs assessment, and then you sign up. It's super simple, takes a few minutes. Worth knowing though that it's not completely confidential because your manager or HR person has to be aware of it. But apart from that, just so you're aware. Then you can just chill and relax once you've applied. Okay, I realize I'm getting near the end, but the last few things, if you thought, you know what, Nat, sounds great, I'm unemployed, I'm not eligible, what can we offer you? Well, what we can do is we can support with CV support. Bit generic, there's loads of organizations that do it, but take advantage of it. We also do a bit of job coaching to help you find the right positions. We do workplace needs assessments for when you are in work. And there are a few occasions where we may do them beforehand, but case by case. We have job boards. Again, not an amazing amount of jobs, but we do have jobs with the partners I mentioned that we have trained. We also do workshops every Thursday. Sign up. We have quizzes online, which can help you understand if you have characteristics or being neurodivergent, because, tests are expensive, and this is a good beginning point. Do you know that our next session, which is delivered by the legend that is Tim Lang, is Getting Career Ready, CVs and Beyond. Now, CVs are a contentious area. People, they're different and diverse. Tim's going to be breaking it down, the do's and the do's nots, and where, if anywhere, you should talk about being neurodivergent. Another thing he'll be talking about is turning negatives into positives. Quite often we're like, I've been unemployed, and you're like, well, what am I meant to write? How are you meant to rework it to make it a positive? There are many ways, trust me. Where can we find those replay? The YouTube, thanks, Anna. Yes, on our YouTube channel, you can watch all our previous lovely content. Oh, yes. Cheers, Anna. Appreciate it. If you want any more information or to get in contact, don't be a stranger. Just email admin@exceptionalindividuals.com and we'll be more than happy to get back to you and support you with assessments, our employers, pointing you in the right direction and going from there. All right. A lot as always, but I hope that was useful. And even if you just got a couple of little things out of there, or you take everything we spoke about today and joined it together in order to narrow down your search for the best employer, then it was a good use of time. Remember, there's no such thing as a completely inclusive employer, but there are lots of things you can do to make sure that you have the best darn chance in finding someone who isn't just going to accept your difference, but utilizes and respects you for the different abilities and assets that you're able to bring. Thanks, everyone. I really hope you found that useful and have a great rest of your day. And those of you who are coming this Thursday, tomorrow, for our general webinar, I'll see you there. Thanks, everyone, and have a great rest of your day.